My name is Thea Mercer. I'm 34 years old, and I showed up 10 minutes early to my parents' 35th anniversary dinner and still walked in after the dessert plates had been scraped clean. My mom smiled at me across the wreckage of a finished meal and said, "Oh, you're late. Cover the bill, will you?" My sister laughed into her empty champagne glass, still as clueless as ever. "How could you be late?" The leather folder slid across the white tablecloth toward me. $1,140. Printed near the top, in small gray numbers, was the moment the first appetizer went in. 6:37. I had been invited for 8:15. I had confirmed it twice, so I did something I had never once done in 18 years of quietly picking up this family's checks. I asked for the manager. What happened in the next 10 minutes turned three faces pale, but here's what none of them knew. The bill was never the trap, and the thing my mother asked me to do 3 weeks later was worse than anything printed on that receipt. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet women stop paying for other people's pictures, and family secrets get settled at the dinner table. If you've ever been the one who covers the bill and gets called clueless for it, this story is for you. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe. Let me back up, because none of that makes sense without the ledger behind it. I'm a certified public accountant. I reconcile things for a living. Numbers, schedules, other people's messes. When a client's books don't balance, I don't get angry at the books. I just keep pulling receipts until the story underneath shows itself. It took me 18 years to run that same audit on my own family. I live in the city with my husband, Michael. He's 38, a chef, the kind of man who says almost nothing and means all of it. Together we own a little food business. Hold that thought, because it matters later. My parents, Frank and Lorraine Hartwell, live 25 minutes out in Cedar Hill, in the same brick house on Maple Court they've owned for 31 years. My younger sister Brooke lives 5 minutes from them with her husband, Grant Weller. That geography matters too. Close enough that they orbit my mother daily. Far enough that I became the relative you call, not the one you know. In our family, everyone had a role assigned so long ago that nobody remembered assigning it. Dad was the steady one, Mom was the gracious one, Brooke was the shining one, and I was the reliable one, which sounds like a compliment until you learn what it costs. Reliable meant I got the calls that started with, "Honey, it's nothing but." Reliable meant my card went down first and the subject changed fast. Reliable meant that when something needed to be absorbed quietly, the family knew exactly which daughter absorbed. For 18 years I told myself that was love with a job description. An accountant should have caught it sooner. The books never balanced. I just hadn't pulled the right receipt yet. The role got assigned the year I turned 16. That was the year Hartwell Hardware went under. My dad had run that store for 12 years. Paint, nails, spare keys, free advice. Then the big box store opened out by the highway, and his customers waved at him in its parking lot. The bank started calling our house at dinner time. My mother would let it ring and smile harder. It was my dad who slid the shoebox of bills across the kitchen table to me one night, after Mom went up to bed. "You're good with this stuff," he said. "I can't tell anymore which ones are screaming." So at 16, I sorted them. Screaming, whining, waiting. I set up payment plans in a spiral notebook and coached my father on what to say to the bank like I was the parent sending him off to school. He lost the store anyway. He took a warehouse job managing inventory for someone else, and he never once complained, and something in his shoulders never came back up. But the family had learned a useful fact. Thea handles it. The first time I paid a bill outright, I was 17. $200 to the electric company from my grocery store paychecks, because the notice was pink, and my mother had a church luncheon to host that weekend. She never mentioned it. Not a thank you, not an acknowledgement. Mentioning it would have made it real. I told myself I didn't need thanks. I told myself that for 18 years, actually. 18 years later, I was still paying that electric bill. It just kept changing its name. To survive in my mother's house, you had to understand that Lorraine Hartwell lived by one commandment, and it wasn't in any Bible. How it looks. She'd been a dental receptionist for 30 years, front desk, first face, and she ran our family the same way. Whatever happened in the back rooms, the waiting area stayed immaculate. Her thank you cards went out within 48 hours, in navy ink, never black. Her Christmas photo was staged in October. And through every year of the store dying and the warehouse job and the pink notices, my parents kept their membership at the Cedar Hill Country Club because the Hartwells had always belonged, and belonging was the whole point. I was 19, home from college, when I finally asked the question out loud. Dad had just picked up a Saturday shift, Mom was addressing envelopes for the club's spring gala. I said maybe the club dues could wait a year, that it was okay to just be normal for a while. My mother set down her fork like it was made of glass and looked at me the way you look at a stain. We don't talk about money at this table. That was the whole conversation. Not anger. Anger would have acknowledged something. Just the rule. Laid down flat. The way you'd close a window. It took me years to understand what that rule was actually for. It sounded like manners. It functioned like a muzzle. Because in a family that never talks about money, nobody ever has to ask who's paying. There was one thing that table never learned. Silence isn't free. Somebody is always paying for it. My sister Brooke, 30 years old, married the picture. Grant Weller worked in finance. That's how he always said it. In finance. The way you'd say in Congress. And from the outside, they were the frame my mother had been waiting her whole life to hang. The leased BMW. The wedding with 200 guests and a champagne wall. Brooke's part-time marketing job that mostly produced photos of Brooke, tan and laughing, captioned with the word, blessed. At Sunday dinners, Grant talked about markets the way weathermen talk about fronts moving in, and lately he'd started mentioning a lake house they were eyeing. I want to be fair to my sister, because this story bends around her later. My parents did not love Brooke 1 ounce more than they loved me. I believed that then, and I believe it now. What my mother loved was the version of our family that Brooke photographed well. Brooke wasn't the favorite child. She was the useful evidence. And me, with my sensible car and my quiet marriage and my job that sounded like a nap, I was the family's off-camera expense. Here's the thing they forgot about accountants, though. We noticed variances. I'd sit at those dinners doing math I never asked my brain to do. A part-time salary, plus whatever in finance meant, minus that car, minus that wedding, minus a lake house nobody ever saw. The numbers on the table didn't cover the life on display. In my office, we have a name for that gap, and a rule about it. A variance is just a story you haven't been told yet, and variances always surface. Now, the part of the ledger my family never read. 11 years ago, when I was 23, and a year into my first accounting job, a diner on 5th Street hired me to do their books. The Bluebird, cracked vinyl booths, a neon bird missing half its glow, and a 27-year-old cook named Michael Mercer who had taken over the place from his retiring boss the year before and was drowning in it. I went in to organize receipts. I stayed because of what I found in them. The Bluebird wasn't failing. It was bleeding from 3 small cuts nobody had noticed, and the food was worth saving. Michael worked 17-hour days and fed half the neighborhood at cost. My grandmother, Nana June, had died the spring before and left me $10,000 with a note in her wobbly cursive. Use it on something that feeds you. I've never been struck by lightning, but I imagine it feels like the night I did this math. I put in that $10,000 plus $18,000 of my own, every dollar I'd saved since I was 16. $28,000 total, for 51% of a diner most people had written off. The scariest arithmetic of my life. Michael kept 49 and the kitchen. I took the books, the lease, the debt. We fixed the 3 cuts. The Bluebird lived, then it worked, then it quietly thrived. 3 years after that, I married the cook. And on paper, remember that word, paper. The majority owner of what came next was me. What came next took 8 more years of flat-top burns and quarterly panic, and its name was Juniper. Downtown, white tablecloths, low amber light, a wine list Michael argued about for a month. We opened it 3 years ago under our company's name, Blue Stem Hospitality. Blue Stem after the prairie grass, because it holds the soil no matter what the weather does. Every food writer in town covered that opening. I mailed my family invitations on thick cream cardstock, hand-addressed, the way my mother taught me. I called too. My mom said it sounded lovely, but the member guest tournament was that weekend, and you can't just skip the member guest. Brooke texted that some new spot downtown wasn't really their scene, maybe once it settled. My dad said, "Congratulations, kiddo," in a voice like he was patting a dog that had brought him something strange. Nobody came. Michael found me that night in the office folding the seating chart into smaller and smaller squares. He took it out of my hands. "You don't owe anyone a second invitation," he said, so I stopped issuing them. Not a grudge, a boundary. And I knew the difference, because a grudge would have felt better. I just quietly stopped explaining my life to people who had shown me the size of their interest. As far as Cedar Hill knew, Michael had the diner and Thea did his books, and that information had been frozen since I was 23. They skipped the opening everyone in town was talking about. 3 years later, they would walk back through those same doors as guests of honor, at a party I was invited to only on paper. The invitation came on a Tuesday in October. The family group chat had been circling my parents' 35th anniversary for weeks. Mom deserves something special this year, that genre of message. Then, separately, a text from Brooke, just to me. Dinner for Mom and Dad's 35th, Saturday. Juniper, 8:15. Just us five. Dress nice. I sat in my parked car outside a client's office and read it 4 times. Juniper. Of all the restaurants in this city, my family had picked mine, and they had no idea. I felt 2 things at once, and didn't enjoy either. The first was a laugh with no sound in it. The second, underneath, was something embarrassingly close to hope. Because here's what I did with that text. I typed back, 8:15, right? And Brooke replied with a thumbs up and champagne glasses. I confirmed the time twice. Hold on to that. Then I drove home and told Michael, and watched the same thought cross his face. Maybe this was the night. 35 years of marriage, the whole family at one table, in the warmest room I have ever built. Maybe this was the night I finally told them the truth about my life, not as a confession, not as a correction, as a gift. I'd give the toast. I'd tell them about Nana June's $10,000 and the bluebird sign and the prairie grass, and then I'd comp the whole meal. My treat, forever. Michael watched me plan it with his arms crossed. He only said one thing. Call me when you tell her. I want to hear her face. I laughed. I actually laughed. Wednesday night, 3 days before the dinner, my dad called me. This matters, so I'll tell it slowly. Frank Hartwell does not use the telephone. He answers it like it owes him money and hands it to my mother. But that night his name lit up my phone at 9 o'clock, and when I picked up he was already halfway through a sentence. Casual in the way of a man who has rehearsed being casual. He wanted to know, hypothetically, how a reverse mortgage worked. Asking for a buddy at the shop, he said. The shop. He'd been retired from the warehouse for 2 years. I put down the invoice I'd been reviewing and gave the buddy an honest answer. What it costs, what it risks, who it makes sense for, which is almost nobody I'd advise. Then I asked, quiet and level, the way I'd ask a client. Dad, is everything okay with the house? A pause with static in it. Then a laugh, half a beat late. Everything's fine, kiddo. You know your mother. She watches those news segments and gets ideas. And we talked about the weather, because in my family, the weather has always been load-bearing. After he hung up, I sat with my pen, not moving. Retired warehouse managers do not ask hypothetical questions about the roofs over their heads. I know what money trouble sounds like when it clears its throat and tries to sound like curiosity. I'd been hearing it since I was 16. So I did what the responsible daughter does. I made a note to sit him down after the anniversary, when the party glow would loosen him, and I filed it away. I shouldn't have filed it. Thursday, Brooke summoned me to lunch to coordinate the anniversary, which turned out to mean I would listen while she narrated a mood board. She talked for 10 minutes about the flowers she'd ordered for the table, white ranunculus, because peonies were over, and the silk scarf she'd found for Mom, and how Grant thought a toast should happen at the right moment. Timing is everything with toasts. Then, somewhere between the entree and the check, she did the thing my family does. She made my role sound like a favor I was begging to do. You're so good with the boring parts, she said, waving her fork. You'll handle the restaurant bill Saturday, right? We covered the flowers. The flowers. $60 of ranunculus against a banquet dinner at the best restaurant in the city. And I'd seen Juniper's private party menu because I had approved it. But sure, we each brought what we could. One of us just didn't know what the other one was bringing. Then came the dig, offered sweetly, the way she'd offered it since we were kids. It must be so nice, honestly. Your little life. No pressure, nothing to keep up. Our check landed. Brooke did the move I could set a metronome by. The slow reach toward her bag, eyes drifting to the window. 3 unhurried seconds of theater, and I put my card down like I always had. And she let me, like she always had. 18 years of choreography in one gesture. I remember thinking, as I signed, that at least Saturday would be different. Saturday, I'd be the one giving. I had no idea how right that was about to be, or how wrong. Saturday arrived wearing October's best light. My mother texted the group chat at noon. Don't be late tonight, with a little smiling face, and I noticed, without letting it mean anything, that no time appeared anywhere in the thread. The time lived only in one place. Brooke's private text to me, 8:15, confirmed twice. Sealed with champagne glasses. I laid my green dress on the bed, the one Michael calls my closing argument dress. I wrapped the gift I'd been assembling for a month. Their wedding photo from 1991, the one that had curled and yellowed in the hallway, restored by a specialist and reframed in walnut. In the photo, my mother is 26 and laughing with her whole face, and my father is 28 with his arm around her like he can't believe his luck, and nothing about how it looks is arranged. I love that photo. I wanted to hand it to the people in it. Michael couldn't come. Our third place, the little bistro across the river, was down a line cook, and Saturday's service waits for no marriage. But he kissed me at the door and said, "Call me when you drop the news. I want to hear her face." I left the house absurdly early for a 10-minute drive, because reliable is a disease, and I let the valet line eat the spare time. Before I walk you into that dining room, let me ask you something. If you've ever double-checked a time, shown up early, and still been told you were late, tell me in the comments, because I read everyone. And if you're new here, hit subscribe. What my family did with a dinner reservation, yours might be doing with something bigger. Because at 8:05, 10 minutes early, I pulled up to my own restaurant, holding a gift for a party that was already over. The valet knew my face. Ray on weekdays, but Saturdays it was a kid named Denny, and Denny did something strange when I stepped out of the car. He looked at me, then at the door, then back at me, like a man doing math that wouldn't resolve. "Mrs. Mercer?" he said, and his voice put a question mark where none belonged. I should have stopped and asked, but I was carrying a walnut frame and 2 decades of hope, so I smiled and went in. The host stand was buried. A 12-top rehearsal dinner had just been seated, servers flowing around each other like water finding drains. And across the room, I saw Danielle. Danielle Ortiz has run our front of house for 6 years. She started at the Bluebird, managing its breakfast chaos with a pencil behind her ear, and moved up with us when Juniper opened. She is the calmest person I employ, which is how I knew, when her face did what it did, that something was wrong. She saw me, and her professional smile dropped for half a second into something I'd never seen on her: alarm, and a kind of wince, like watching someone walk into a glass door. She started toward me, weaving between tables, and got close enough to say, "Thea, I didn't see your name on the..." And then the kitchen door swung open. A food runner said her name with the urgency that means now. The 12 tops entrees were dying under the heat lamps, and Danielle gave me one helpless look and was gone. I stood there holding my parents' 1991 wedding photo, hearing the last thing she'd said with no idea what it meant. She knew something I didn't. In about 4 minutes, we would trade. I found my family at the big round table in the back corner, the best table in my house, the one we hold for anniversaries. They were finished. Not finishing. Finished. Dessert plates scraped clean, espresso cups drained, my sister's lipstick print on an empty champagne flute. Brooke's white ranunculus sat in the middle of the wreckage looking as confused as I felt. 4 chairs showed the comfortable sprawl of people 2 hours into an evening. The 5th chair, mine, stood untouched. And I noticed, the way you notice a missing stair, that there was no place setting in front of it. No napkin, no silverware, no glass. My mother looked up, and her face did something I will spend years trying to forget. It lit with genuine, unhurried pleasure, the hostess spotting the last guest. "Oh, you're late," she said, warm as anything. "Cover the bill, will you?" A ripple of laughter went around the table, the padded kind that furnishes a joke that isn't one. Brooke didn't even look up from her phone, still as clueless as ever. "How could you be late?" Grant leaned back, 2 buttons open, and slid the leather check folder across the tablecloth toward me with one finger, the way you'd push a plate toward a dog. My dad was the only one who met my eyes, and then the only one who couldn't. I stood there in my closing argument dress, holding their wedding photo in walnut, and I looked at that bare stretch of tablecloth in front of my chair. You don't forget to set a place at a family dinner. Someone tells the server not to. There was no place setting at my chair, because you don't set a place for someone you decided not to feed. I sat down in the chair with nothing in front of it and set the gift beside me, and 18 years of training reached for that leather folder on autopilot. I even had my thumb on my card. Then I saw the numbers. Whoever printed the check had left the kitchen timestamps on, the way our system does for large parties. First item fired at 6:37. Oysters, 2 orders. Champagne, 6:58. The good bottle. Entrees away at 7:15. Dessert, 7:52. The entire evening, 35 years of marriage, toasted and plated and celebrated, sat printed on one strip of paper, and every minute of it was over before 8. My invitation said 8:15. I had it in writing. I had confirmed it twice, and been confirmed twice, with a thumbs up and champagne glasses. I did the only thing I know how to do when numbers tell a story people won't. I read it again. 6:37 doesn't happen by accident. A party of 4 doesn't get seated 90 minutes before the fifth guest by a scheduling slip, not when the fifth guest has the time in writing. The reservation was made for 6:30. Mine was the only 8:15 in the building. I looked up from the check and around the table, one face at a time, the way I go down a column. My mother, radiant, Brooke, bored, Grant, watching me with his arms crossed and something patient in his mouth. My father, studying his coffee spoon like it had scripture on it. And the understanding arrived whole, the way a balance does. They didn't invite me to dinner. They invited me to the check. I want to tell you, I stood up right then and delivered the speech 18 years had earned. I didn't. What I did was watch my father reach for his water glass. It's a small thing, a man reaching for water. His shirt cuff pulled back as his arm extended, and I saw his wrist, and the room went a little quiet in my ears. Bare. My father's wrist was bare. You have to understand, Frank Hartwell has worn the same watch since before I could read. A steel Hamilton, bought the week he opened Hartwell Hardware, back when the future had his name on the sign. When the store went under, he sold the shelving, the register, the sign itself. He kept the watch. He wore it through every warehouse shift for 16 years, wore it fishing, wore it to my wedding. My whole life, that watch was the one thing he owned that the world hadn't repossessed. And tonight, there was only a pale stripe of skin where 30 years of it used to sit, white against his tan like a scar that hadn't decided what to be. He caught me looking. His hand came off the glass and his cuff came down. One smooth, practiced motion, and his eyes went anywhere else. My anger didn't disappear. It just moved over and made room. Because a man doesn't take off a watch like that. A man surrenders it. Somewhere between the reverse mortgage question on Wednesday and this table on Saturday was a story nobody was telling me, and it was wearing my father's tan line. So I made a decision, sitting in front of no place setting. The old Thea would pay, drive home, and cry in the garage with the engine off. I stayed in the chair. Somebody at this table was drowning quietly, and for once, it wasn't me. If you want to see my mother truly come alive, give her an audience. It took her about 90 seconds to find one. 2 tables over, being seated with menus, were the Pattersons, Bill and Sandra, Cedar Hill Country Club, the couple whose Christmas letter my mother had been quietly competing with for 2 decades. My mother's spine found 2 new inches. The voice changed registers, from family warm to reception desk bright, projecting just enough to carry. Sandra, look at this. The whole family, celebrating us, 35 years. A wave like a parade float. Sandra Patterson waved back, mouthed congratulations, admired the flowers from a distance, and my mother gestured around the table at the empty plates, the drained flutes, the daughter who had just arrived to a finished meal, and presented it all as bounty. Our girls insisted, she told the room. Nothing's too much for family. I watched her do it, and for the first time in my life I saw the machine instead of the woman. The performance wasn't vanity, it was maintenance. It was a payment on a mortgage I couldn't see yet, made in the only currency she trusted. I leaned toward my dad while she performed, and I asked it quietly, under the room noise, one professional to the man who'd once slid me a shoebox. Dad, everything good with the house? His mouth opened, and my mother, without turning her head an inch, without letting 1 watt drop from the smile she was aiming at Sandra Patterson, said it through her teeth, in the voice she reserved for the back rooms. We don't talk about money at this table. Funny thing about that rule, I'd heard it my whole life, and it had only ever silenced one person, the one paying. The server came to clear the last dessert plate, and Grant decided the moment had ripened. He tapped the leather folder twice, a little drumroll, and smiled at me with all the warmth of a term sheet. 11:40. All in. You got this, right? We covered Mom's flowers. Brooke lifted her empty flute for a toast that had already happened. To Mom and Dad, 35 years, and the table laughed and echoed it. Glasses of nothing raised all around, and the laughter slid over me the way it does over staff. I have watched guests laugh exactly like that past a busser holding a tub of their dirty dishes. That's what I was at this table. Staff, in a good dress. I looked down at the check one more time, not because the number scared me, $1,140 is a Tuesday at Juniper, but because I wanted to memorize the shape of the evening printed there. Oysters at 6:37, the good champagne at 6:58. Entrees at 7:15, dessert at 7:52, and a daughter due at 8:15, arriving early with a gift in walnut to find the party eaten and the folder waiting. Every family has a language. This receipt was mine translated into ours. I closed the folder, set it flat on the tablecloth, and kept my hand on it. And I felt my voice come out level in a way that had nothing to do with calm and everything to do with a decision cooling into place. Is Danielle on tonight? My sister rolled her eyes so hard I heard it. You need a manager to pay a bill? She was right, actually. She just had the sentence pointed the wrong way. I wasn't there to pay it. Danielle crossed my dining room the way she does everything, like the floor owes her rent, and then she saw the seating arrangement. Me, at the finished table, behind the leather folder, and I watched 6 years of history assemble the whole picture in her face before she reached us. She could have made it awkward. She's too good for that. She stopped at my shoulder, folded her hands, and addressed me in the voice she uses for critics and health inspectors, warm and bulletproof. Mrs. Mercer, I am so sorry. The reservation came in under Weller, party of 4. I had no idea this was your family's table. Had I known, we would have taken care of everything from the start. The room kept its noise, but our table lost all of it. I felt the silence land differently on each chair, and I said the sentence I had never once, in 18 years, allowed myself to say, and I said it quietly, because loud would have been for them and quiet was for me. It's all right, Danielle. Put it on the house account. The owner's table. What happened to their faces happened in 3 different languages. Grant's phone, which had been lying face up beside his espresso cup all night, turned over with a small clack, and his tan went with it. Brooke's empty flute stopped halfway to a toast that no longer existed, her mouth still holding the shape of a joke. And my mother's smile stayed exactly where Sandra Patterson could see it, while everything behind it left the building. 3 pale faces, 1 preserved smile. But it was my father I couldn't stop watching. Frank Hartwell didn't go pale. He closed his eyes, slow, like a man in a waiting room finally hearing his name called. Relief and dread arriving on the same breath. He wasn't surprised the floor had moved. He'd been standing on the crack the whole time. Brooke recovered first, the way she always did, by refusing the evidence. You're a bookkeeper, she said. You do Michael's books at that diner. So I gave them the truth the way I give an audit finding. Flat, sequenced, no adjectives. 11 years ago, I bought 51% of the Bluebird with everything I had saved, plus what Nana June left me. $28,000. It grew into Bluestem Hospitality. Bluestem opened Juniper 3 years ago, and the bistro across the river last year. The invitations to Juniper's opening night sat on the kitchen counters of every adult at this table. You RSVP'd no, that was all. No numbers they could call bragging, no tour of my life. 5 plain sentences and the quiet. Grant had his phone back out under the table rim, thumbs going, and I watched him find the Bluestem page, watched his jaw do the arithmetic of exactly how large a mistake he had catered. Brooke kept looking from me to the room, the tablecloths, the amber light, the wine wall, like furniture would contradict me. And then, my mother finished recalibrating, and I got my first look at how Lorraine Hartwell processes checkmate. Her chin came up. Her eyes went wet and bright and aimed, and in a voice pitched perfectly to sound brave, the voice of a woman rising above an injury, she said, "So you sat there and let us celebrate, and then you, in front of the Pattersons, a beat," and the sentence found its true shape. "Why would you humiliate your family like this, Thea?" And there it was. In my mother's ledger, the crime was never the trap they'd set me. The crime was that it had been witnessed. Nobody lingers over a comped meal they meant to stick you with. Within 10 minutes, my family was performing its goodbyes. My mother kissed the air beside my cheek for the benefit of the room, told the Pattersons the girls had spoiled them rotten, and steered for the door with her chin at gala height. It was my dad who slowed. In the parking lot, under the valet lights, he caught my elbow, and up close he looked like a building with the load-bearing wall gone. "The 8:15 thing," he said, barely moving air. "That wasn't your mother, honey. Grant set the time. Said it'd be smoother. Smoother." I stood there holding the word. Smoother meant present for the bill and absent for the evening. Smoother meant my chair with no place setting, my name attached to the check, and nothing else. And under the word, something colder was moving, because you don't need smoother unless the check itself was the problem. Unless nobody else at that table could catch it. My dad's mouth was still working. "Thea, honey, listen, there's something," and from the dark, my mother's voice arrived like a hand on a shoulder. Sweetness stretched over steel. "Frank, it's cold." He straightened. Whatever had been climbing out of him turned around and went back down. He gave my elbow one squeeze, the same squeeze from the shoebox nights. I'd have known it blind, and walked to the car, and I watched my father cross that parking lot with his shoulders set like a man carrying a suitcase no one else could see. I stood next to the gift I'd never given, in front of the restaurant I owned, and understood that I had gotten every answer tonight except the one that mattered. Smoother for whom? It took my mother less than 48 hours to get her version into circulation, and her version was a masterpiece. By Monday, my phone was ringing with ants. The story going around the family did not contain a 6:30 reservation, a fifth chair with no place setting, or a leather folder traveling across a tablecloth. In my mother's cut, Thea had money all along and hid it from her own family. Can you imagine all those years letting your parents worry? And then she chose their anniversary, in front of the Pattersons of all people, to spring it. Aunt Carol got me at my office line, her voice soft with borrowed grief. Your poor mother cried all night, sweetheart. Was the little show necessary? The little show. I sat with the phone against my ear, looking at a client's clean, honest, reconciled ledger, and I felt the old reflex wake up and stretch. I knew exactly how to fix this feeling. I'd been fixing it since I was 17. You buy the piece, you write the check, or the apology that works like a check, and the temperature drops. And everyone gets to keep their version, and the cost quietly posts to your account. I actually drafted the text. Mom, I'm sorry that the night went the way it did. I never meant. My thumb hovered. Michael set a cup of tea at my elbow and said nothing, which is his loudest setting. And I looked at that apology the way I'd look at a suspicious invoice, and I asked it my professional question. What, exactly, are we paying for here? I deleted the draft. I want to pause here, because I know some of you are yelling at me to call those ants back with the truth. I get it. But if you've ever watched your own story get rewritten by the person who wronged you, you know why I went quiet instead. Comment the ledger if you've been there, and subscribe, because what my dad carried into my diner that Thursday broke this whole thing open. I had bought the piece for 18 years. It never once stayed bought. Tuesday afternoon, my sister walked into my accounting office without an appointment, and I almost didn't recognize her. Brooke curates herself the way museums curate wings, and the woman in my doorway had mascara shadows and a coat buttoned wrong. She sat down across my desk, in the client chair, and I understood this was the first time in our adult lives she had ever come to me. Then the picture cracked all the way through. Grant lost his job 4 months ago, she said. Not restructured, not consulting. Walked out with a box from a brokerage that did not send references. The BMW was 2 payments behind on a lease they should never have signed. The cards? She looked at the ceiling and set it to the light fixture. 61,000, and the number had been growing in the dark like a mushroom because Grant kept saying one good quarter would fix it, and there was always a reason this quarter wasn't the one. The lake house talk was for my parents. The dinner was Grant's design. Juniper or nothing, he'd said, because the Pattersons' daughter had posted from Juniper, and if they were going to be seen celebrating, it had to be there, and they could not pay for it, Thea. We could not pay for dinner. So he set my arrival for the ending, present for the bill, absent for the evening. Smoother. She asked for the thing I knew she'd come to ask. Just float us 1 month, quietly. Don't tell Mom. And I heard it. The family motto, wearing my sister's shaking voice. I didn't write the check. I slid a card across the desk. A nonprofit credit counselor, a woman I trust, no charge, and said, bring Grant, bring the real numbers, then we talk. Brooke stared at that card like it had slapped her and left without it. Thursday morning, my father came to the Bluebird alone. I was in the back office when Danielle texted me, your dad's at the counter. And when I came out, he was on seat 4. The cracked one he didn't know I'd never fixed out of superstition. Drinking black coffee like the last 30 years hadn't happened. He didn't do small talk. He unfolded a paper from his jacket, smoothed it flat on the counter, and turned it so it faced me. And my chest did something I'm still not sure I've undone. Bank letterhead. Notice of default. A second mortgage on the house on Maple Court. $86,000. Taken 6 years ago. A signature I recognized and one I barely did. Behind on payments. $9,200 past due. 30 days to bring it current. Or the process everyone knows the name of begins. I asked the question in order, like an intake form, because order was all I had. Where did it go, Dad? He counted it off on his fingers. Quiet, like a man confessing to weather. The club. Every year they couldn't afford it. Because your mother. And he stopped. And restarted. Brooke's wedding. The part that made it look the way it looked. 25,000 into Grant's sure thing. 2 years ago. Gone where sure things go. The roof. The real kind of problem. The only honest item on the list. And the watch. He said it before I could ask. staring into his coffee. Pawn shop out on Route 9, $900. It covered a piece of last month's payment. Your mother doesn't know the letter came, he said. Thea, don't tell her I told you. And there it was again. The only thing this family ever asks me for. My money and my silence. That night, I did what I do. I put every number on my own kitchen table and made them all sit in the light at once. 9,200 past due, 86,000 behind it, 61,000 on the Weller cards, $1,140 of anniversary dinner. And down in the corner of the page, because accountants are honest even when it's ugly, my own column, 18 years of quiet transfers, the electric bill, the club dues I covered twice in my 20s without ever being asked out loud, the lunches, the check after check after check. A lifetime line item I had never once totaled because totaling it would have made it real. Michael read the page over my shoulder, and being Michael, he found the simplest true sentence in the room. Blue Stem could wire the 9-2 tomorrow. Nobody would feel it. He was right. That's what stopped me cold. Nobody would feel it. The letter would vanish. My mother would never know. My father's shoulders would come up an inch. Christmas would arrive on schedule with Navy ink thank you cards, and the machine would simply keep running because the machine had never once, in 30 years, been asked to feel anything. It ran on exactly this. Quiet money. I stood at my own kitchen window and finally read my own file. Every silent check I had ever written wasn't kindness. It was fuel. Every time I absorbed a cost in the dark, the picture survived another season, and the people inside it got to keep not knowing, and the daughter outside it got to keep being invisible, which, I saw with the clarity you only get once or twice in a life, was the deal I had been accepting all along. Invisible is safe. Nobody audits the ATM. I had been the second mortgage of this family since I was 16 years old, and both of us were now past due, so I didn't wire anything. I picked up my phone, and I called my mother, and when she answered with her reception desk voice, I said it without a hello. Level, the way you read a verdict. Sunday, your kitchen. We're going to talk about money at the table. A silence so long I could hear her smile ending, then the click. I set the phone down, and Michael looked at me across all those numbers, and neither of us said anything, because there was nothing left to reconcile. Sunday then. Sunday afternoon, I drove the 25 minutes to Cedar Hill with a folder on the passenger seat and walked into a kitchen staged like a diplomatic summit. Ironed tablecloth, the silver coffee service that only leaves the cabinet for funerals and bishops. My mother had dressed for it, pearl earrings, and she had arranged my father at the table like a prop, and Brooke was perched on a stool by the counter with the stillness of a girl who has been told to be scenery. I sat down and reached for my folder. My mother reached for her coffee pot first, and before I got a word out, she made her opening offer with the serenity of a woman who had spent 3 days building it. She had decided, she said, pouring, to forgive the scene at the restaurant. Families weather these things. What mattered now was moving forward, and moving forward looked like 3 small items. I would take care of your father's little arrears. She said it exactly like that. The little arrears? As if it were a stain on a jacket. Quietly, of course. This week, before the 30 days ran out, she knew about the letter. She'd known the whole time. Item 2. A note to the Pattersons. Something gracious, smoothing over that unfortunate evening. And item 3. She set down the pot and smiled at me with what I genuinely believe she felt as love. We never speak of any of this again. Any of it. The mortgage, the dinner, the restaurant, the whole unpleasant chapter. And then, she said, Christmas like always, family like always. There it was. The whole shining package, everything I'd wanted since I was 16, wrapped and priced. All I had to do to buy it was disappear again. I didn't open the folder. Instead, I asked the question I had never once thought to ask in 34 years, and I asked it gently, because I actually wanted the answer. Mom, who taught you the rule? She blinked. What rule? No money talk at the table. The picture first. Who taught you? And something happened in my mother's kitchen that I had never seen. The hostess flickered. For a second. Just one. Nobody was performing. She looked at the iron tablecloth, and when she spoke, her voice had a 19-year-old in it. She'd saved 3 months of her receptionist pay once, she said. Bought her mother a good wool coat. Camel, from Hendricks downtown, the kind the doctors' wives wore. Her mother drove it back to the store the next morning and returned it for cash. Told the salesgirl her daughter had gotten above herself. Told Lorraine, in the car, that a coat like that on their street would make people think they were struggling and showing off about it. And the one unforgivable thing a family could do was let people see it sweat. In my family, my mother said, folding her hands, you learned that they keep you when the picture is pretty. So I kept this family's picture pretty for 35 years, Thea, whatever it cost. That was my job. Her hands lay flat on the tablecloth, and I noticed, for the first time I could remember, a chip in her nail polish. One small flaw, at her own stage table, next to the silver coffee service. For 1 second, I saw the 19-year-old holding the returned coat, and I understood my opponent completely, and it didn't change one thing I had come to do. Then the second passed. My mother straightened. So, the card for the Pattersons, Monday? I opened the folder and laid one handwritten page on her iron tablecloth, turned so everyone could read it, and I went down it out loud, slow, the way you read names at a memorial. 9,200. The past due, 86,000. The second mortgage nobody voted on, 61,000. Brooke, my eyes flicking up, and my sister going white on her stool. The cards, 1,140. Dinner. My mother's hand moved toward the page like she could tidy it away, and I put my finger on it and held it flat. This family is not broke, Mom. This family is expensive. There's a difference, and I'm done funding it in the dark. Then I made my offer, and I made it looking straight at her, because she deserved to hear terms the way she'd given them. Calmly, at a table, over coffee. 1. Blue Stem pays the bank $9,200 this week, directly, on the record, with my name on the wire where anyone can read it. Not a secret. Never again a secret. 2. A credit counselor. An independent one. No charge. Already vetted. Sits down with you and Dad, and with Brooke and Grant, and every card and every balance goes on her desk. That part is not negotiable. It rides with the money. 3. Dad. And my father lifted his head. The Bluebird needs a morning host, Tuesdays through Thursdays. Real shifts, real wages, your name on a schedule. And the first paychecks are yours. And I'd start with Route 9, because the Hamilton's redemption window is 90 days and we are inside it. 4. First Sunday of every month, dinner at the diner. All of us. And no bill will ever touch that table. I looked at the whole architecture of her offer and gave her my answer to the last item on it. And the note to the Pattersons. No, I won't apologize for being seen. My mother rose from her chair the way a flag goes up a pole. If you do this, she said, and her voice had lost its reception desk finish, had gravel in it now. If you turn this family into your charity case, then don't come at Christmas. The refrigerator hummed. Brooke didn't breathe. My father's thumb moved once across his bare wrist, an old habit checking the time on skin, and I heard myself answer quietly, and I heard what it cost as it left me. The whole 18-year-old dream of her arms, paid out in one sentence. Then I'll miss you at Christmas, Mom. The diner does a real nice roast on Sundays. You spend your whole life buying a seat at a table. Nobody tells you that you can build one. My mother left her own kitchen. She walked down the hall with her spine at gala height, and her bedroom door didn't slam. It clicked, softly, which somehow was worse. A slam is a sentence. A click is a verdict. The three of us sat in the wake of it, in a kitchen that smelled like coffee and starch. And for a long moment the only sound was the refrigerator and the little clock over the stove that has run 4 minutes fast since the 90s. Then my father cleared his throat, and Frank Hartwell, 63 years old, asked me the first question of his new life. This morning shift, he said. Tuesdays. Do I get one of those aprons with the bluebird on it? I said yes, and my voice only broke a little on it. He nodded like a man accepting terms he'd read carefully, and both his hands stayed wrapped around his cold cup, and his shoulders, I watched it happen, came up half an inch. From the stool, so quietly I almost missed it, my sister spoke to the countertop. That counselor, does she do evenings? A breath. Grant gets proud before 5. I told her evenings could be arranged. I gathered my page of numbers and left the counselor's card on the iron tablecloth, square in the middle, where the coffee service had been. On my way down the hall, I stopped at the bedroom door. 1 second. My hand came up, and I saw it hover there, 17 years old, holding a pink notice, ready to knock and make it all quiet again. I put my hand back in my pocket and walked to the car. Some doors you leave shut, you just make sure yours stays open. 6 weeks then. The wire went out Monday morning, $9,200, my name printed plainly in the memo line, and the bank confirmed the account current by Thursday. On the record, in the light, boring as a receipt, which was the entire point. The counselor got the Hartwell file and then, 2 weeks later, the Weller file. Her first appointment with my sister Grant sat in the parking lot for 40 minutes before he came in. Brooke told me this herself, over the first honest coffee we've had since childhood. But he came in. The BMW went back. They're a one-car family now, in a smaller apartment with a $61,000 plan taped inside a kitchen cabinet, 4 years long, and my sister, who once narrated mood boards at me, stirred her coffee and said, "Turns out I was the clueless one." She said it dry. We both let it sit. My father worked his first Tuesday in a Bluebird apron and found out the regulars remembered Hartwell Hardware. One of them still had a key he'd cut in 1998, and Danielle says he tells terrible jokes and refills coffee like it's a sacrament, and that he hasn't stood that straight in years. His third paycheck, he drove out Route 9 alone. He came back with the Hamilton on his wrist, where the pale stripe used to be, and he never said a word about it, and neither did I. Some accounts you let a man settle himself, and my mother sent a Thanksgiving card. Navy ink, perfect slant, no apology anywhere on it, because the woman is who she is. It said the weather had turned, and the club was doing a smaller gala this year, and, in the last line, the only sentence that mattered, "Your father seems well?" Aunt Carol reports that at the club, the story now features my daughter, the restaurateur. The picture survives. It just doesn't bill me anymore. The third first Sunday of the month, the long table by the Bluebird's front window was set for 6. It always is. That's the rule I never say out loud. On the wall by the register, in its walnut frame, hangs the 1991 wedding photo I never got to give them at Juniper. My mother laughing with her whole face, the gift that finally found its table. My dad worked the room in his apron even though it was his night off. Brooke came early. My sister, early, carrying a salad she'd made herself, and Michael put it on the table between his roast and the good bread like it belonged, because it did. Grant came too, quieter these days, learning the difference between small talk and small print. At 7 minutes past 6, the bell over the door rang. My mother stood in the doorway of a diner she had never once entered in 11 years, in her good coat, chin exactly where it always is. Nobody made it a moment, which is the kindest thing a family can decline to do. She sat down at the empty place, set, like always, napkin and silverware and glass, because at my table every chair gets a setting whether or not you believe the person is coming. She ordered the meatloaf. She ate all of it. And somewhere between refills she looked at my father laughing behind the counter, steel catching the light on his wrist, and said the only sentence she's ever going to say, which in my mother's currency is a full confession. "Your father's watch looks nice." Toward the end, one of the regulars called over, joking, asking who's picking up the tab for the big table. I looked around at all of it, and answered him. "It's on the house. It always was." Here is what 18 years of paying quietly finally taught me. Love that has to be purchased isn't love, it's rent. And the only table worth sitting at is the one where nobody ever slides you the bill for belonging. That's my story. One dinner timed to the minute, one bare wrist, and a kitchen table where I finally said the quiet numbers out loud. If you're the one who always covers the bill, take this as your sign. Help in the open, or not at all. Share this video with someone who pays in silence. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.